Welcome back, everyone. My name's Timmy, and you're watching another episode of Neverwinter Poopy Caca. Alright, what's going on, everyone? It's Garlaanx here, bringing you a new Neverwinter video. As today, as the title suggests, we're going to talk about the Band of Air changes, balancing changes, aka nerfing. Yes, so we all knew that this change was coming eventually. The Band of Air was too powerful, so they released two little mini articles about it, which I am going to read to you word for word. Links in the description as always. Let's jump right into this nonsense. So everybody should be familiar with the Band of Air. It is the ring that comes from hardcore Vault of Stars. You have to collect the reagents from the mini bosses, bickety bam, slam dance them together. You get yourself either a Band of Air or a Band of Darkness. However, the Band of Air was much superior to the Band of Darkness, so everyone got the Band of Air. Excluding me, of course. I did not partake in any of this nonsense. So, here we are today. As of filming this video, it is, I don't know, Thursday, September 15th, 2022. Let's jump right in here. Balance changes, general discussion. The recent changes to Band of Air and Bone Devil's Ribcage have brought up the question of how we make balance adjustments more generally. It's important to emphasize that we do not want to lower the power of an item just because it's quote-unquote too strong in some abstract sense, or even because it's stronger than we might have originally intended when we designed the item. First of all, let's just throw this out there. This item, when it was put in the game, was never tested. When Band of Air first got put in the game, it was extremely broken and people were one-shotting major bosses in the game. This was discovered on, of course, preview, brought to the developers' attention, and yet they still released the item broken as can be. They've done this several times throughout the game's history. There is no QA, there is no quality assurance when it comes down to item optimization and item creation. It's been abundantly clear throughout this life cycle of the game that never happens. The Band of Air was so broken, it was a joke. And everybody knew it was going to get nerfed and or fixed, whatever you want to call it, whatever terminology you want to use. It was going to get nerfed, simple as that. It was literally one-shotting major endgame bosses, so yeah, shortly after the Band of Air was introduced, it did get its first nerf, and it's getting tweaked again because yet it again is still too powerful. Items should be lowered in power level only if their current power level is actually hurting the game. That typically means one of the three things. The item strongly and directly damages the player experience. Which it did. I mean, nobody wants to play a game where everybody could just one-shot everything. Yes, I enjoy the easy route. I've been quoted saying that, yes, the more powerful we are, the better. I enjoy steamrolling content. But there's a difference in steamrolling content because my character is that good versus a obvious broken item. An example would be if an item allowed a boss to be killed in just a few seconds, which I just said. Items that have server or client performance issue would also fall into this category. Cases like these are fairly rare. The item creates a real haves versus have-nots experience all by itself. Of course, some characters will be much better geared than others overall, but it shouldn't come down to a single item. If, for example, players who are forming groups are only willing to accept those who have some specific item, that's a bad situation. So they're saying that people are being excluded because they don't have a Band of Air. That's just silly talk. At the end of this video, I'm literally going to play a bunch of clips of me out DPSing people that have Band of Air in the current state, and I don't. The Band of Air is a broken item. It is. It's severely overpowered. And should have been adjusted the first time it was introduced into the game, and it wasn't. But do you have to have a Band of Air to do well in Neverwinter? No, 100% not. I do not have a Band of Air, and I out DPS people that have Band of Air. Now, am I saying that I'm better than those people? Not necessarily. Those people are either not playing their class correctly, or they're doing something wrong. If I go against a good player that knows how to play their class, especially a rogue, they're going to out-DPS me because of the Band of Air. And that's just the way that the item is, and it's broken and it procs off everything. But it is possible to still be successful, be high-end DPS in Neverwinter, and not have a Band of Air. It's possible. I do it every day. The item prevents us from making good new gear in its slot. This is really important. A lot of the fun of Neverwinter is getting new gear for your character. Every time there's an item so strong that all other items in that slot, not only now but even in the future, are worthless, that takes away from the fun. And I agree with that statement. If the Band of Air continues the way it is, no one is ever going to replace it, because Cryptic would have to make something better than the current Band of Air, and then you would just have another broken item on your hand. Again, item optimization in an MMORPG is very important, but it's also very hard. It's not very easy to balance items accordingly to what is then considered best in slot, and why is it best in slot, why is it outperforming other said gear, etc. Now, I harp on Cryptic about item optimization all the time, and how badly they do it and implement it. And it is hard. I understand that it's hard, but that's also your job to do. So, it is what it is. This is by far the most common problem of the three, and of course it is the most, common problem. I mean, item optimization is hard. If they're going to continue to make new gear as the game progresses, that gear has to be better than the old gear. There has to be a chase item. There has to be a need for a player to waste 5 hours of grinding time or more, 10 hours, 20 hours, 50 hours of real-life grinding time to get an item, only for that item not to be better than an item they already have. And we see that all the time in Neverwinter. If you look at Dragonflight that was just reintroduced, and I harped and moaned and complained about this, they put a whole new set of Dragonflight gear in the game, and it was complete doo-doo butter. Absolute garbage fire that no one is going to use, because the Dragon Hunt gear is much superior than the new Dragonflight gear. So it makes no sense. Cryptic doesn't know how to properly item optimize, and it is what it is. So they're they're nerfing the Band of Air. If we do have to lower the power level of an item, and it's an item players worked hard to get, which is very often the case, we will try to keep the item strong and viable, and not just lower its power level to the point where it never makes sense to use again. So basically they're trying to justify themselves by saying, hey, listen guys, we're not going to nerf the Band of Air into the ground. It's still going to be worth the time and effort it takes to farm it. However, it's not going to be as potent as it clearly is right now on live. That won't always be possible, and even where it is possible, sometimes we'll miss the target. Yeah, no kidding, Cryptic. You missed the target on a lot of things. It's a hard one to hit, but that will be our goal. In practice, an item that is crazy good for everybody will often, when balanced, become an item that's good for some classes and builds, but only okay for others. Again, they have X amount of classes in the game. You cannot balance one item around every single class. Some classes using the Band of Air are going to perform other classes that are using the Band of Air or not using the Band of Air. For instance, a rogue is very broken. The rogue has been broken for years. If you have a Band of Air on the rogue, you are going to destroy everything. It's as simple as that. Even when they nerf the Band of Air and you still continue to use the Band of Air, now other classes might seem more viable with the Band of Air, let's say a Warlock versus a Rogue. However, the Rogue is most likely still going to beat you because the Rogue itself is broken. Now, when you take me, for instance, a Warlock versus a Rogue, I can hold my own to a degree, but them having a Band of Air does give them that slight edge. Again, I have out DPS'd Rogues using a Band of Air, whether they just don't know how to play their class, or whatever the case may be. At the end of the day, it's still possible to perform high DPS with whatever class you're using without the Band of Air. Balance changes will not generally lead to make goods, but we might make exceptions in certain cases involving big power decreases for items people had to directly pay cash for. We want to emphasize that it is never our intention to grab cash from some deliberately too strong item and then lower its power level. So a make good can be called for those cases. Yeah, Cryptic doesn't put items on the Zen market, charge a outrageous fee, and then nerf it. What they like to do is take a, let's say, exclusive mount skin, put it on the Zen store, charge exorbitant amount of Zen, and then put it in the Astral lockbox. Yeah, Frost Giantess, anyone? Yeah, okay, fuck you, Cryptic. In order to get better at making these kinds of changes and to make fewer mistakes in the first place, we have recently formed a rewards council. The council has all the item designers, the lead system designers, the executive producer, and selected quote-unquote expert character builders from other parts of the Neverwinter team. Now, I don't know what this means, if it's all only internal people, or if they actually have community members that are going to be in on this council. Community members should 100% be on this council, because we have seen what Cryptic has done over the past 9 years, and it's dog shit. You need input from high-end, experienced players for things that you may miss as a company, because you clearly missed them. Again, when the Band of Air was first introduced into the game, it was so beyond broken that it wasn't even funny. Just YouTube search Band of Air and look at some of the original videos of people one-shotting Vault of Stars bosses. Like, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke. So I don't know what about this rewards council, if it's only internal team members or if they do have some PC members. I'll never be invited to anything related to Cryptic. They haven't included me in 9 years. They're not going to include me now. So I would love to work with them. Everybody knows I would love to work with them, but that will never happen. So hopefully they have some community members in the background, even if they don't, basically tell us outright. So it looks like it's internal, but hopefully they do have some people in the community working on this and doing QA testing essentially for free, because they're not paying them. The rewards council reviews all the items for each module before they go out, and it also reviews any big item power level changes we make on already released items. Note, the rewards council does not just lower power levels, especially in pre-release reviews. There's a lot of feedback along the lines of, nobody will want that, what can we do to make it better? So far, we have actually spent more time increasing power levels than lowering them, although we do both. We hope the amount of worthwhile gear we release with each module will go up over time as the rewards console gets better at its job. So, hear me out on this. Dragon Hunts Mod 23, in my opinion, was fantastic when it came to the gear. The content was a joke. I mean, you were basically just farming dragons over and over again nonstop. There wasn't really any content value there. But the gear was good. In my opinion, the gear was good. The gear far outweighed anything we had. It was basically upgrade versions of what we currently have, and that's how gear should properly be progressed. Going forward, I would like to see the same, and now that they are focusing on this, there's no excuse for there to be another incident like they just did, where I just mentioned about the Dragonflight. They redid the Dragonflight event, they put new Dragonflight gear in the game, and it wasn't properly itemized, and it's complete dog shit. So, if you haven't seen that video, I have a discussion about the Dragonflight if you want to go more in depth on, what I think should have happened with the new Dragonflight, etc. We know that every time a strong piece of gear has its power level lowered, it can be painful. We hope that by being careful, being consistent, and following the guidelines discussed above, we will nevertheless still be making Neverwinter a better experience, and that any pain from the lowered power levels will be outweighed by the more enjoyable Neverwinter overall. Blah, 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 blah. So that's the first article, just the general direction. Let's actually look at the changes and see what we got going on here. The Band of Air. The Vault of Stars ring Band of Air has been universally acknowledged as extremely strong, and many have viewed it as unreasonably strong. We have taken a close look, and after careful considerations, we have made some adjustments. We hope it will still be a strong endgame usable item, but not so extremely powerful as before. The situation. When trying to distinguish a very strong item from one that is actually so strong that it needs to be modified, there are several things we look for. For more about these issues, you can see the general direction thread that we just read, including Does the item all by itself separate players into haves and have-nots? So this is what we discussed on the first article, is about groups in-game not including people that have a Band of Air. You're forming a Master Tiamat raid. You're not going to invite anyone that isn't using a Band of Air. It's just silly. It's absolutely silly. Is it hard for us to make new items to compete with? Again, we discussed this in the first section of the article. We want to keep making new items for players to go after, which they can't. If they left the Band of Air alone, it would be the best in slot ring until something else came along that would then rival the Band of Air. But how are you going to make a stronger item than Band of Air when the Band of Air is already extremely broken? We feel that the Band of Air has both of these problems, no kidding. Let's look at some specific details of the Band of Air. It currently has a chance to proc every time the player does damage, even with other procs. So that's the first issue, having that. Having things proc off other procs is not a good situation technically. It can lead to infinite loops or just server strain generally. It may not be a balance issue per se, although in this case it is, but it's absolutely a reason Band of Air needs adjusting. 100%. That's the number one problem with the Band of Air, in my eyes, is that it literally procs everything. You can proc your Band of Air off everything. Your weapon enchantments, your overloads, some overloads. Red Dragon Glyph was proccing it. Like I said, weapons, everything. Everything can proc it. It's a joke. It's an infinite procking loop. In practice, a strong build can proc Band of Air at or close to its theoretical maximum of once every second. Essentially, rogues. Again, you're casting Path of Blades, and your Path of Blades is procking your weapon enchantment. It's procking everything else, and then the Band of Air has chances to proc off all of those procs. Even the artifacts, it's just one big proc fest. Its base damage per proc is extremely high. Band of Air has a base damage of 6 times the player's weapon damage. Base damage of 6 times weapon damage. Put that into perspective, folks. My base damage on my Warlock right now is over 10,000. Is my base damage on the Warlock, maxed out Warlock, over 10,000. What they're calling weapon damage, but weapon damage doesn't even exist in the game anymore, which is funny. So we're talking damage. So the Band of Air, one single item, is 6 times that. So you're telling me if I did have a Band of Air, my Band of Air alone would have 60,000 base damage. 60,000. Okay, yeah, makes sense. For reference, the baseline for a typical at-will is 1x, an encounter is 3x, dailies used to be 5x, but they are probably closer to 10x now. There's a lot of variation, especially among dailies, but that's the baseline. So if a player is proccing Band of Air every second, that means the player is getting a free daily every 2 seconds while they continue to do whatever else they are doing. Or alternatively, the player is getting a free encounter twice a second. Or if the player is just left clicking and holding, it is as if the Band of Air says your at-wills do 7 times more damage. Comparing the Band of Air to specific other top tier rings such as Red Air's Glare, it contributes much more to players' damage than they do. I don't know why they chose the Red Eye's Glare to compare the Band of Air, but they did. They think that the top tier ring is the Red Eye's Glare, so it is what it is. All of these facts point to the Band of Air potentially needing some downward adjustment. What to do? Given that the Band of Air does not make sense where it is, the question then arises as to how to best change it. It is relatively easy to drastically reduce the power level of an item to the point where it is no good at all. However, if players have worked hard to acquire that item, that may not be a good solution. So we wanted to keep the Band of Air a strong item, ideally, still best in slot, at least in those builds that can make good use of it. We wound up choosing Red Eye's Glare as a comparison point. Again, no idea why. No idea why they chose the Red Eye's Glare to go head-to-head with a Band of Air. The Red Eye's Glare is a decent ring, but I mean, there are definitely better rings than the Red Eye's Glare in my opinion. It's widely viewed as a top-tier ring, and it has the advantage of being an entirely stat-based item. This meant, from a testing perspective, that there were unlikely to be any awkward surprises in the details of how it works. Our goal over multiple test, adjust, retest cycles was to get Band of Air as good as Red Eye's Glare, or even a bit better, but not too much better. Be aware that unlike Red Eye's Glare, Band of Air is very build dependent. Some builds that used Band of Air, even when it was not great fit, might have found it was still very good for them to use just because it was so extremely strong in general. Those builds might find the adjustment Band of Air less appealing. Builds that got full usage out of the Band of Air before are the builds most likely to find it's still a solid choice, and quite possibly still their best choice. Resulting changes, here's a summary of the changes. The intent Band of Air, as good as other top tier rings, but not by an excessively large margin. Ring of Darkness, also worthy of consideration, although not necessarily in the same tier as Band of Air. Set bonus for 2 rings stronger than the base rings for some, but not necessarily all builds. Band of Air now procs only on actual attacks the player makes. Typically, Neverwinter item procs on at-will encounter or daily usage, but in recognition of Band of Air's history, it's now set to proc on all attacks. Mount powers, artifact powers, even potion trays like the Doohickey or Neverwinter Hawk will have a chance to proc. But Band of Air will not proc on other procs or triggered effects. Damage amount significantly reduced. We tried just the above proc reduction by itself, but the Band of Air was still far outperforming Red Eye's Glare in that case, so adjusting the damage was also necessary. Ring of Darkness, the other item in the Queen's Empowerment set, has the same changes, but the damage amount was only reduced somewhat. It was not as high to begin with. Set bonuses tweaked only slightly, so Band of Air set bonus not altered. This means it's relatively better compared to the base Band of Air than it used to be. Before it was much worse. Some builds might now prefer the Band of Air with the set bonus, but some builds may still find the base Band of Air better. Again, it all depends on what class you're playing and how many times you can proc this stupid thing. Ring of Darkness set bonus increased just slightly compared to the base Ring of Darkness, though it's not strictly worse than the base Ring of Darkness, which before it was. The boss HP of hardest content reduced. This is one of the biggest things to take away from this whole discussion. Since the Band of Air was contributing such a big part of the damage of very high-end players, we've reduced boss HP by 10% in Master Trials and Tower of the Mad Mage. So they knew everyone was abusing the Band of Air, so they had to buff up the boss's HP to make the trial still somewhat difficult. Now that they're nerfing the Band of Air, they have to reduce the HP of the bosses by 10%. That's a big deal. Note, as part of an unrelated Sharandar overall progression overhaul, Band of Air and Ring of Darkness are easier to acquire. Another major part of this update notice here. We all know the reagents were not easy to get. You had to grind, you had to farm, and remember, it was hardcore Vault of Stars, so if you died, you had to start all over again no matter what. Now it seems that the reagents might get a boost in drop rate. Remember, they just increased the drop rate of Masterwork materials from Vault of Stars as well. Hopefully the above changes solve the biggest problems with the Band of Air as described above, while still leaving it a solid item choice in many top-tier builds. There it is, folks. I read it word for word for you. Links will be in the description. I don't really care. Honestly, I don't care. I didn't care about when the Band of Air came out. I don't care about it now. Will I end up ever getting one? Maybe. Maybe one day I'll farm Hardcore Vault of Stars just to get one. Do you need it? No. You really do not need it. It is not a necessary item to have in your arsenal to do high DPS. Now, is it going to help you? 100% yes. Absolutely, it's going to help you. But do you need it? No, you don't need it. If you don't want the headache of grinding hardcore Voss, then just simply don't do it. And you'll perfectly be able to do content. You'll still be able to do Master Tiamat and all the other endgame trials, even if you don't have a Band of Air. So they're adjusting the Band of Air. The Band of Air is getting nerfed most likely soon, within the next couple patches, I would guess. That's all I really got for you today. I don't have very much more to say on the topic itself. I'm going to play a couple clips of me out DPSing people just for the funs and giggles, and because I'm a Timmy and I don't have a Band of Air and I'm super salty and wow, let me cry some more. Band of Air nerfed. In my opinion, it should probably be nerfed even more. Who cares if it becomes irrelevant? It's an MMORPG. New items need to be created in future modules that should be better than the Band of Air anyway. So, do I care about this? Personally, not at all. Should you care about this? That's up to you. That's all I got for you. Enjoy the clips of me pooping on some random Band of Air users. I'll see you guys real soon.